The constant hum of computers filled the underground research station in Antarctica. Outside, the bitter wind howled across the frozen landscape, but Dr. James Miller barely noticed it anymore after 3 years of working here. His eyes stayed fixed on the monitor as he sipped his 4th cup of coffee that night. Something about the data didn't look right. The deep space monitoring equipment had picked up an unusual pattern 2 days ago. At first, he thought it was just another routine space noise, maybe from a distant pulsar or dying star. But this was different. The signal repeated itself every 147 seconds with perfect timing. Nature wasn't usually this precise. He rubbed his tired eyes and called out to his research partner. "Hey, Mike, come look at this." Mike wheeled his chair over, nearly spilling his own coffee. "See this pattern? It's been steady for 48 hours now. No variations at all." Mike leaned closer to the screen, his forehead wrinkled in concentration. "That's not natural. Run it through the pattern recognition software again." James did as suggested, and the results made his heart skip a beat. The signal showed clear signs of artificial origin. It was coming from the direction of Alpha Centauri, Earth's closest stellar neighbor, and it definitely wasn't human-made. Their small research station had just discovered humanity's first proof of alien life. The next few hours passed in a blur. They double and triple checked their findings, ran every possible test, and finally made the call to their superiors. By morning, the station was buzzing with activity as more scientists arrived on emergency flights, braving the harsh Antarctic conditions to verify their discovery. Word spread through the scientific community like wildfire, but always under strict security protocols. The world's leading astronomers and researchers connected through encrypted video calls, analyzing the data, arguing about its meaning. Some thought it was a natural phenomenon they didn't yet understand. Others were convinced it was artificial. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They weren't alone anymore. World leaders were quietly informed. Emergency meetings were held in secret. Military commanders studied defense plans that had existed only as theoretical exercises. The question on everyone's mind was, should they tell the public? The signal kept coming, steady and unchanging. Now other monitoring stations around the world had picked it up too. It couldn't be kept secret much longer. Amateur astronomers would notice soon, if they hadn't already. James hadn't slept in 72 hours, but he couldn't leave his post. He kept watching the pattern, trying to decode its meaning. Was it a message, a beacon, a warning? The mathematics behind it were beautiful in their simplicity. Prime numbers arranged in a clear sequence. Whatever made this signal wanted to be noticed. Then something changed. The pattern shifted slightly, incorporating new elements. James's hands shook as he analyzed the change. The new pattern contained repeating elements that could only be interpreted one way. They were counting. First prime numbers, then what appeared to be a basic mathematical sequence, and now they were counting. And they were counting down. The world's governments couldn't wait any longer. As the signal's change was confirmed by multiple stations, they knew they had to act. In coordinated announcements across the globe, leaders addressed their citizens. The news was delivered with careful wording, trying to prevent panic while being honest about what they knew and how much they didn't know. Humanity had been noticed. Someone out there knew they existed, and they were apparently on their way. Some people panicked, clearing store shelves and heading to rural areas. Others celebrated in the streets, seeing this as a moment of unity for all humankind. Religious leaders gathered to discuss what this meant for their faiths. Scientists worked around the clock, trying to prepare for whatever might come next. In Antarctica, James finally allowed himself to be relieved by another researcher. As he lay in his bunk, trying to sleep, his mind kept racing. In all the years humans had searched the stars for signs of life, they'd never considered one crucial fact. Finding alien life meant being found by alien life. The signal was still coming, still counting down, and somewhere out there, something was heading toward Earth. Humanity's first contact was about to begin ready or not. And all they could do now was wait and watch the numbers tick down, wondering what would happen when they reached 0. 3 weeks after the signal's discovery, Captain Linda Walker stood on the bridge of the International Space Station, staring at the live feed from their new long-range sensors. The objects had appeared suddenly, moving faster than anything humans had ever tracked. 7 massive shapes, each bigger than the largest ships on Earth, crossing the vast distance between stars like dolphins through waves. The emergency upgrade of the space station had happened in record time. Every spacefaring nation had contributed resources and personnel, turning the scientific outpost into humanity's first line of defense. Linda's military training felt oddly out of place among the hastily installed equipment, but everyone knew why soldiers now floated alongside scientists. "They're slowing down," reported Jack, her sensor specialist, "breaking speed at a rate that should be impossible." He shook his head in wonder. Their technology must be centuries ahead of ours. The ships had crossed billions of miles in weeks, but they were decelerating so smoothly that it defied human understanding of physics. Linda watched the numbers change on the display. At their current rate, they would reach Earth's orbit in less than 2 days. Down on Earth, governments had given up trying to keep things quiet. The alien ships were now visible through amateur telescopes, 7 bright points of light moving against the star field. Social media was flooded with photos and videos. Some people saw them as bright stars of hope, others as incoming harbingers of doom. The first attempt at communication came from a united broadcast using every major radio telescope on Earth. They sent simple mathematical sequences, similar to the ones they'd received in the original signal. Hours passed with no response. They tried different frequencies, different patterns, even basic pictures encoded in binary. Still nothing. "Captain," Jack called out, his voice tense. "They're changing formation." The 7 ships had been traveling in a straight line. Now they spread out, forming a perfect circle as they approached Earth. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The precision of their movement showed power and control that made human spaceflight look like child's play. Military satellites tracked their every move. Fighter jets stayed on constant alert, even though everyone knew they would be useless against visitors who could cross between stars. Aircraft carriers patrolled the oceans, and ground forces stayed ready, but it all felt like bringing sticks to a gunfight. Linda received constant updates from ground control. Cities around the world had strange mixes of empty streets and crowded gathering places. Some people fled to rural areas, while others formed massive crowds in parks and squares, holding signs welcoming the aliens. Emergency services were stretched thin, dealing with both panic and celebration. "New movement detected," Jack announced. One of the ships had launched something. Small objects, hundreds of them, spreading out in a web-like pattern. Everyone on the bridge held their breath. But the objects stopped at high orbit, forming a network around Earth. Analysis suggested they were some kind of scanning devices. They lit up with strange energies, taking readings of everything from the atmosphere to the ocean depths. Earth's own satellites couldn't even detect what kind of data they were collecting. The president's voice came through on the secure channel. "Captain Walker, you're our eyes up there. What's your assessment?" Linda studied the tactical display, considering her words carefully. They're being obvious about their technological superiority, but they're not making any aggressive moves. If they wanted to attack, they could have done it already. This feels more like curiosity. A new alert flashed on the main screen. The alien ships had completed their scan and were repositioning again. 6 of them moved to higher orbits, spreading out to cover different sides of the planet. The 7th, the largest of them all, was descending. "They're entering the atmosphere," Jack reported, his voice steady despite the tension. "Tracking their trajectory. Looks like they're heading for the Pacific." Linda watched as the massive ship, easily the size of a small city, broke through the cloud cover over New Zealand. It moved with impossible grace for its size, coming to hover over the empty plains of the country's South Island. The moment humanity had waited for was about to happen. First contact wouldn't be through radio signals or mathematical equations. It would be face to face. Humanity was about to meet its first aliens, and no one knew if they were ready for what would come next. The massive alien ship hung in the air above New Zealand's South Island like a frozen silver cloud. Military forces from a dozen nations maintained their distance, forming a wide circle around the landing zone. Ambassador Tom Reed watched through binoculars from the hastily established command center, his throat dry with anticipation. Ground sensors showed the grass below the ship was barely moving, despite its size. Whatever kept it floating didn't create any wind or disturbance. That alone told them more about alien technology than decades of research could have discovered. The ship simply ignored Earth's gravity as if it were an optional law of nature. Movement on the hull called out one of the military observers. Everyone grabbed their binoculars. A section of the smooth silver surface was changing, flowing like liquid metal until it formed what looked like an entrance. The opening was at least 50 feet tall. The Universal Translator team checked their equipment one final time. They had spent the last 2 weeks programming every known human language into the system, along with basic mathematical concepts. It was humanity's best effort at creating a way to talk with beings from another world. Light flashed from the opening, bright enough to make everyone shield their eyes. When they looked again, they saw them. The aliens had finally shown themselves. They moved like living crystals, their bodies transparent but filled with shifting colors. Each one stood about 8 feet tall, with forms that seemed to change shape as they walked. No one could tell if they were wearing suits or if that was their natural form. They didn't walk so much as float slightly above the ground, their crystalline bodies catching and reflecting sunlight in rainbow patterns. 5 of them descended from the ship, moving with a grace that made them seem almost weightless. They carried no visible weapons, but strange devices floated beside them like obedient pets. The sight was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Ambassador Reed straightened his tie and looked at his team. This was the moment they had trained for, even though such training had only started 3 weeks ago. "Remember," he said, "stay calm and move slowly. No sudden gestures." They all nodded, trying to hide their nervousness. The small group of humans walked forward, following the carefully planned protocol. Military snipers watched through their scopes, knowing their weapons would probably be useless but feeling better for having them aimed. Medical teams stood ready, though no one knew if human medicine would help either species if something went wrong. As they got closer, they could see more details of the alien bodies. Patterns of light moved through them like blood through human veins. Their forms seemed to shift between solid and liquid states, yet they maintained humanoid shapes with what appeared to be heads, bodies, and limbs. The translator team activated their device. It projected a series of mathematical equations into the air, followed by simple pictograms showing peaceful intentions. The aliens stopped, their bodies pulsing with new patterns of light, but they made no move to respond. Then the aliens began to build. The devices floating beside them spread out, creating structures that grew from nothing like fast-growing crystal trees. Within minutes, they had created a series of transparent buildings around their ship. They worked with incredible speed and precision, ignoring the humans completely. Reed's team watched in confusion as more structures appeared. Some looked like they might be laboratories, others like communication arrays, but it was hard to tell. The aliens continued their work without trying to communicate, their bodies flashing with patterns of light that seemed to coordinate their efforts. "Sir," one of the scientists whispered to Reed, "those crystals they're using. They're changing the ground underneath. The soil composition is altering at a molecular level." The alien structures were spreading, beautiful but unstoppable. Wherever they touched the earth, changes rippled outward like waves in a pond. Grass withered, then regrew in strange colors. Small animals fled from the advancing crystal formations. Reed looked at his useless translator, then at the aliens who were reshaping the earth with casual ease. First contact wasn't going anything like they had planned. The aliens weren't hostile, but they weren't really making contact either. They had simply started doing whatever they came to do, and humanity was left watching from the sidelines of their own planet. Dr. James Miller arrived at the New Zealand site 3 days after the landing. The alien crystal structures now covered several square miles, spreading like beautiful but deadly frost across the landscape. He watched through the window of his hazmat suit as another group of birds fell from the sky. Their feathers turned an unnatural blue. The military had drawn closer, tanks and troops moving into defensive positions. The aliens continued their work, seemingly unaware or unconcerned about the growing human presence. Their crystalline bodies pulsed with complex patterns of light as they built more structures, each one more strange than the last. "The soil samples are worse today," his assistant reported through the radio. "The chemical changes are accelerating. Whatever they're doing, it's not just affecting the surface anymore. The alterations go down at least half a mile now." James studied the readings on his tablet. The aliens' crystal technology was reorganizing matter at the molecular level, changing the basic chemistry of everything it touched. Plants mutated within hours of exposure. Small animals either died or underwent shocking transformations. The changes were spreading faster than anyone had expected. A military radar operator noticed it first. The crystal structures were growing in a pattern. From above, they formed perfect geometric shapes that seemed to be expanding according to some alien mathematics. It looked beautiful in satellite photos, like a snowflake made of light. But it was also terrifying, because the pattern showed no signs of stopping. Captain Linda Walker, now coordinating with ground forces, called an emergency meeting. At the current rate of expansion, they'll reach populated areas in less than 2 days. We need to make them understand what they're doing to our ecosystem. The universal translator had failed completely. The aliens didn't respond to sound, radio waves, or even sign language. They seemed to communicate entirely through the shifting light patterns in their bodies, a language no human could speak or understand. James noticed something odd in his data. The changes to the soil and air matched patterns he'd seen before in terraforming proposals. Old NASA studies about how to make Mars habitable had similar chemical processes, just much slower and less advanced. "They're terraforming Earth," he announced to the shocked meeting room. "They're changing our planet's chemistry to match whatever their home world is like. They probably don't even realize we're intelligent life. To them, we might look as simple as the grass or birds." A burst of activity from the alien site interrupted the meeting. New crystal towers rose into the sky, taller than anything they'd built before. The structures began emitting a soft purple glow that spread like a fog across the changed landscape. Military leaders argued for an immediate attack before the changes spread further. Diplomats pleaded for more time to attempt communication. Scientists warned that any attack would likely be both useless and potentially catastrophic if it damaged the alien technology in the wrong way. James watched the light show in the aliens' bodies, trying to find patterns. He noticed they moved differently when they worked with different types of crystals. There was a logic to it, a kind of visual language of light and color, if they could understand it. But they didn't have time to study and learn. The purple fog was changing the air's composition. Weather patterns around the site were shifting. If the aliens' terraforming continued, it would soon trigger changes that couldn't be reversed. The military made its decision. Warning shots were fired, powerful shells landing near but not hitting the alien structures. The crystalline beings stopped their work for the first time since landing, their bodies flashing with rapid pulses of red and white light. More crystal towers burst from the ground, forming a defensive wall. The aliens hadn't attacked, but they'd made it clear they could protect themselves. Their bodies now glowed with steady red light, a color humans instinctively understood as warning. Two species faced each other across a changed landscape, both believing they were defending themselves from the other. Neither could communicate their true intentions. Neither understood that they were about to make things much worse. Alex Wright hadn't slept in 36 hours. The young programmer sat in a cramped monitoring station just outside the military perimeter, surrounded by screens showing different angles of the alien crystals. While others focused on the growing crisis, Alex watched the light patterns flowing through the aliens' bodies, certain there was something everyone else had missed. The military was preparing for conflict. Tanks had moved closer, and aircraft circled overhead. The aliens had stopped expanding their structures after the warning shots, but their defensive wall now pulsed with dangerous-looking energy. Both sides were ready for battle, waiting for the other to make the first move. Alex played back footage from the first landing, comparing it to current images. The light patterns weren't random. They repeated in specific sequences, like words in a sentence. Some patterns always appeared together, while others never did. It reminded him of programming code, if this, then that. He pulled out his laptop and started writing a simple program to analyze the patterns. Hours of footage ran through his pattern-matching algorithm. Slowly, connections emerged. The aliens used specific light sequences when working with specific crystals. Other sequences appeared when they communicated with each other. There was structure to it, logic. "It's like a programming language," he muttered, adding more code to his analysis. "They don't talk with sound. They program reality with light." A commotion outside interrupted his work. The purple fog from the alien structures had reached a small stream, turning the water an unnatural color. Fish floated to the surface, their scales crystallizing. The military began moving into attack positions. Alex looked at his screen, then at the aliens. An idea struck him, crazy but possible. He grabbed some equipment from the monitoring station and ran toward the command center, ignoring shouts from the guards. They knew him from his weeks of work there and let him pass. He burst into the command center where Dr. Miller and Captain Walker were arguing about response options. "Wait," he shouted. "I know how to talk to them." The room fell silent. Alex caught his breath and explained his discovery. The aliens didn't use sound because they communicated through structured light patterns, like a computer code that altered reality. They weren't ignoring attempts at communication. They simply couldn't understand them. "Give me 20 minutes and some equipment," he said. "I think I can send them a message they'll understand." Captain Walker looked at Dr. Miller, who nodded slowly. "Do it," she ordered. "We're out of other options." Alex worked frantically, connecting his laptop to high-powered LED arrays normally used for stadium lighting. He programmed the lights to replicate the most common patterns he'd observed in the aliens' communication. It wasn't perfect, but it might be enough to get their attention. The makeshift communication device powered up. Bright lights flashed in carefully programmed sequences, copying the patterns Alex had seen the aliens use when working together. The pattern repeated 3 times before anything happened. The alien closest to their position stopped moving. Its crystalline body shifted color, displaying a pattern Alex had never seen before. He quickly adjusted his program, trying to match the new sequence. It was like a bizarre game of Simon Says played with light and mathematics. More aliens gathered, their bodies pulsing with rapid light patterns. Alex's program recorded and analyzed each new sequence, building a rudimentary dictionary of light-based phrases. He noticed some patterns were mathematical, simple sequences that could serve as a foundation for more complex communication. "They're responding to the patterns," he told the amazed observers. "Each time we repeat one correctly, they give us a new one. They're teaching us their language." The defensive wall powered down. The purple fog began to recede. Through his improvised light communication system, Alex managed to transmit images showing the damage their terraforming was causing. The aliens' bodies flashed with patterns he interpreted as surprise and concern. One alien stepped forward, its body glowing with a complex sequence of lights. Alex's program translated it into a simple mathematical pattern that could only mean one thing: they wanted to talk. Human ingenuity had found a way to bridge the gap between 2 completely different forms of life, turning potential conflict into conversation. The alien structures began to change color, shifting from threatening red to a calm blue that spread across their crystalline surfaces. Through Alex's light-based communication system, they learned the truth. The aliens had thought Earth was an uninhabited world suitable for colonization. They had no idea their terraforming process was harmful to an existing civilization. The next few days were a blur of activity. The aliens immediately stopped their terraforming program, their bodies flashing with patterns that Alex's computer translated as deep concern and regret. They brought out new devices, different from the terraforming crystals, designed to repair the damage they had caused. Dr. Miller worked alongside the aliens, studying how they restored the changed landscape. The crystalline beings used their technology to break down the harmful changes at a molecular level, returning soil and water to their natural state. Birds that had fallen from the sky were brought back to life through processes that seemed like magic to human observers. They're not just undoing the damage, Miller explained to the assembled scientists. They're teaching us how their technology works. Every restoration process is a lesson in molecular manipulation. The military forces slowly pulled back as the situation changed from crisis to cooperation. Captain Walker found herself coordinating with the aliens to establish safe zones where their technologies could be tested and studied. The aliens' defensive wall transformed into a research center where both species could work together. Alex's communication program grew more sophisticated as the aliens helped improve it. They added new patterns and mathematical concepts, building a bridge between their light-based language and human understanding. Soon they could share complex ideas, though some concepts from each species remained difficult to translate. Through these exchanges, humans learned that the aliens, who called themselves something that translated roughly as light shapers, had a society based entirely on the manipulation of energy and matter. They didn't build machines. They grew them from programmed crystals. They didn't speak or write. They shared knowledge through pattern manipulation. The light shapers were equally fascinated by humans. They had never encountered beings who could adapt so quickly to new concepts or create solutions with such limited resources. Alex's ability to decode their language with simple computers and lights amazed them. They had assumed any intelligent species would naturally communicate through energy patterns. One alien scientist, working with Dr. Miller, made an exciting discovery. Human brain waves could be translated into light patterns similar to their own language. They developed a new interface that could convert human thoughts directly into their light-based communication, making translation almost instant. The public watched in wonder as footage of the cooperation was shared worldwide. The light shapers' crystalline bodies were beautiful when they worked, flowing with complex patterns of color that humans were slowly learning to read. Some patterns meant excitement, others showed curiosity or satisfaction. News crews captured the moment when the last patch of altered ground was restored. The aliens' bodies pulsed with blues and greens that everyone now recognized as happiness. They had fixed their mistake and, in the process, forged a connection with a species entirely different from themselves. Military leaders met with alien representatives, using the improved translation system to establish boundaries and protocols. The light shapers offered to share some of their technology, but warned that humans would need to discover many things for themselves to truly understand them. The most surprising revelation came during a joint scientific session. The light shapers admitted they had never encountered a species that could adapt so quickly to new ideas. Most civilizations they knew were set in their ways, taking centuries to accept new concepts. Humanity's ability to face a crisis, find an unexpected solution, and embrace change was unique. As the sun set on another day of cooperation, Alex watched the aliens working with human scientists, their bodies glowing with patterns of mutual understanding. What had started as a potential disaster had become something remarkable. Two completely different forms of life finding common ground through human creativity and alien wisdom. It wasn't just a crisis resolved. It was the beginning of something much bigger. 6 months after first contact, the New Zealand Research Centre had become a bustling hub of human-alien cooperation. Crystal towers now housed laboratories where scientists from both species worked together, their activities lighting up the night sky with beautiful patterns of communication. But today was special. The light shapers were ready to share something big. In the main chamber, Alex watched as the aliens' bodies pulsed with excitement. Their new translation system, now refined and perfected, converted their light patterns into words everyone could understand. "We have prepared your first glimpse of the greater community," they announced. The chamber walls transformed into a vast three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light appeared, each representing a different civilization. The light shapers weren't alone out there. They were just the first to find Earth. Now they would help humanity prepare for meeting the others. Dr. Miller studied the map with wonder. How many species are there? The answer came in patterns of blue and gold light. Over 10,000 known civilizations, each unique, but none quite like humans. The light shapers explained that most species took centuries or even millennia to adapt to new technologies and ideas. Humanity's quick thinking and adaptability were unprecedented. In just 6 months, humans had learned to read light patterns that took other species generations to understand. Captain Walker, now head of Earth's new Space Defense Coordination Team, asked the practical questions. Are they all friendly? Do we need to prepare for threats? The aliens' response was interesting. Most species kept to themselves. They explained. Conflicts were rare because most civilizations developed very specialized ways of living that rarely competed. But sometimes misunderstandings happened, like their own first contact with Earth. That's when they made their proposal. The light shapers wanted to establish a permanent embassy in Earth orbit, not just for themselves, but as a neutral meeting point for all species. They had noticed something remarkable about humans: their ability to understand different viewpoints and find creative solutions made them natural mediators. The next few weeks brought more changes than the previous 6 months combined. The first orbital embassy took shape as a massive crystal structure, growing like a beautiful snowflake above the Earth. Other alien species began arriving, each stranger than the last. Some were energy beings, others lived in clouds of gas, and some existed in ways humans could barely understand. But true to the light shapers' observation, humans proved remarkably good at finding ways to communicate with each new species. Alex's translation program was adapted for each new form of communication they encountered. Dr. Miller and his team developed new scientific theories combining knowledge from multiple civilizations. Captain Walker established protocols for peaceful interaction that even the oldest spacefaring races found useful. The light shapers shared their faster-than-light travel technology, but with a twist. They helped humans understand the basic principles, then stepped back to let them develop their own version. They had learned that humans worked best when solving problems themselves rather than being given direct solutions. Earth itself was declared a protected neutral zone, a place where different species could meet, trade ideas, and resolve conflicts. The planet's unique mix of environments and conditions made it perfect for hosting diverse life forms. Humanity's role wasn't to conquer the stars, but to help different civilizations understand each other. More alien ships arrived each day. Some came to trade knowledge, others to seek help with problems their own species couldn't solve. Humans' ability to think outside the box, a concept that fascinated many alien species, proved valuable in finding solutions to conflicts that had lasted centuries. In the orbital embassy, Alex worked on teaching a group of gas-based beings how to use light patterns for communication. Dr. Miller collaborated with energy creatures to understand new forms of physics. Captain Walker helped negotiate peace between species so different from each other they had never found common ground before. The light shapers watched it all with pride, their bodies glowing with patterns of satisfaction. Their mistake in first contact had led to something unprecedented: a young species taking its place in the galaxy, not through conquest or technological superiority, but through understanding, creativity, and the ability to bring others together. Humanity had found its role in the universe. They weren't the strongest, fastest, or most advanced species out there, but they were the ones who could adapt, understand, and help others do the same. The future wasn't just about exploring the stars. It was about helping different forms of life find ways to connect.